What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another video, and in this video we're going to be talking about the latest installment into the Transformers series titled Transformers: Rise of the Beast, directed by Caple Jr. and starring people like Anthony Ramos, Dominique Fishback, Peter Cullen, Ron Perlman, Peter Dinklage, Michelle Yeoh, Pete Davidson, and many others. Rise of the Beast is the latest installment into the Transformers series that is another Transformers movie. Welcome everybody to my review for the latest Transformers film. I haven't covered a whole bunch of them here on the channel, but the Transformers series overall, the franchise, is something I have a lot of nostalgia for. It's not one of my favorite when it comes to the various franchises that are out there, but it's definitely one that I've always thoroughly enjoyed. Whether it be the cartoons I grew up watching, or the video games I played, or the movies that have come out over time, or as a kid playing with the toys, Transformers has definitely been a franchise that has been around in my life, and I'm sure many of your lives, for quite some time. And unfortunately, in the modern day, the films have kind of had a bit of a bad taste in the mouth of many people, as with each installment it felt like things were starting to get worse when they were in the hands of Michael Bay. I was a huge fan of that original Transformers film, and while I loved the action of the following films, I always found that the stories just got worse and worse with each installment. However, I was really happy to see something like Bumblebee that came out a few years ago, which kind of revitalized it. It was the prequel to all those films. It's set apart so much from the events of those other films that it's able to be its own thing. It had its own charm, and it was very much like an E.T. story starring Bumblebee and Haley Steinfeld, and I really enjoyed that one, and I really enjoyed the beginning of that movie and the setup for what was to come. So here we are now with the follow-up to that. Haley Steinfeld is not in this film, as we center this time around on different characters, most notably on the character of Noah, played by Anthony Ramos, and I thought for the most part this film was a good time. I'm really happy to say that I enjoyed it. What I will say right out of the gate though is that similar to a lot of other Transformers tales, this is a fairly simple story. There's a thing that Transformers need to get, that if they get it, everything's okay. They can save themselves, they can, save Cybertron, all that stuff. But if the bad guys get it, it's gonna mean world doom. It's gonna be the end of all life as we know it. So it's just one of those classic tales. Don't let the bad guys get this artifact, this thing. Let the good guys get it instead so that they can save the world. It's pretty much a pretty straightforward concept that we've seen in these Transformers films time and time again, and thankfully here, while it is very simplistic, it's still entertaining enough to enjoy. I don't think this is the best Transformers film by a mile, but nor do I think this is one of the worst or even a bad movie. I've seen some people dogging on this movie already, and while I do understand that this film is going to be kind of just a bit of run-of-the-mill for a lot of people, I think that if you're going into these movies at this point, it's just kind of nice to be able to just shut your brain off, watch a movie that has a lot of big fun action and allows you to just kind of enjoy it without having to take it too seriously. And there's a lot of franchises that I've slowly started to kind of change my perspective on when I go into a new installment. Transformers is definitely one of them, and also things like the Fast and the Furious movies. When those films first started kind of switching from street racing and a more realistic tone to becoming these big over-the-top action films, I wasn't really the biggest fan of it. I used to dog on them, but as time went on and as these films progressed and got crazier and continued to come out, I just started to go to each film just kind of knowing they're going to be ridiculous, over-the-top, bombastic films, and I started to enjoy them more on that level. So with the Transformers films, I just go in looking for a good, fun time in terms of action and visuals, and I'm very happy to say that that's exactly what we got here with this movie. The action in this movie is top tier. I would say some of the better action that we've gotten in this series. There's definitely some moments of this that feel reminiscent of previous films in this franchise, but for the most part I felt like this one stood out enough. There's a lot of really great moments of action throughout the course of the film. In terms of the narrative, as I mentioned, it's pretty straightforward and simplistic, which often has the stakes feeling pretty just standard when it comes to something like this. You never really worry too much about all the characters, especially the heroes, because you kind of know they're going to be okay as time goes on. There may be some things that shock the audience from time to time in this movie in terms of some big losses for our heroes at times, but even with certain things that happen in this movie, there's always kind of like this promise that everything's going to be okay when it comes to a movie like this and our heroes. So you know, the stakes tend to be kind of just there, you know, nothing that you're overly kind of like lost into thinking, oh my god, what's gonna happen, but you know, they're there enough for you to kind of root for the heroes as the movie goes on. And yeah, I think for me, what this movie really was for me was an enjoyable action popcorn film. Again, a simple tale with some solid performances, but awesome action, especially in the third act, and the very final last sequence of this movie has me pretty hyped for what's to come with future Transformers films. I won't touch on it here because I don't want to get into any spoilers, but that final moment before the credits roll, I think definitely put a huge smile on a lot of people's faces and surprised many people that we would be getting that kind of a finale at the very end of this movie. So yeah, now that I've talked about my general thoughts on the movie, let's talk a little bit about the premise here. As I mentioned, you have this artifact, you have this thing that the Transformers are trying to get. The bad guys needed to destroy the world, and the good guys need it in order to protect the world. And the main bad guy we're focusing on here is Scourge, who is a henchman of a much bigger bad guy known as Unicron. And Scourge is the one going out and trying to retrieve this item, this key that will allow Unicron to come and consume Earth and other worlds around the galaxy. And so of course now you have the Transformers, the Autobots, getting together with the Maximals, I believe is what they're called, from I believe Beast Wars, which is a cartoon I used to watch as a kid. So it was really cool to see them finally brought to live action. So yeah, you get to have these two badass groups of robots working together to fight these bad guys, and yeah, it leads to a lot of fun action. Amidst all this, you have the character of Noah, played by Anthony Ramos, who is this, you know, down on his luck guy who used to be in the army. He's got a lot of issues going on with his family, as his brother has sickle cell, and he's been, you know, kind of working hard to try to help make ends meet with his mom and him to try to get his brother in a healthier state. And because of this, he just kind of finds himself down on his luck. He's in a rut. He's not really in a great place mentally, financially, and he just wants to be there for his brother, but is losing hope in himself. Outside of him, you have Dominique Fishback's character Elena, who is this individual when we first meet her, who is an intern at a museum, and she's really knowledgeable. You can tell right out of the gate they set her up to be this character who's really into archaeology and geography and different things like that. And for me, she was the character out of the human characters that I liked the least. She was the one that I kind of found was just kind of there for a lot of exposition and some convenience in terms of the plot, so that these characters could know where to go and how to read certain symbols that they would uncover as time goes on. There is a little bit of an Indiana Jones element to this film from time to time, and so she's kind of just there to help uncover those things. I enjoyed her enough in the film, but ultimately, if I had to think of one thing that I would remove from the film that really wouldn't have ruined it for me, it would probably be her character. It has nothing to do with the actress, just more so to do with the writing around her character. Anthony Ramos, though, as Noah, I thought was probably one of the better lead protagonist human characters that has been in one of these Transformers films, as I felt like he was one of the most useful to the Transformers themselves, often being a great, you know, helping hand alongside these Transformers in a lot of the action and crazy things that were going on. Whereas with most of these films, the human characters tend to just kind of be there, kind of evading things and running from the other robots in these action sequences, and oftentimes aren't really all that helpful. But in the case of Noah, this character I found was far more entertaining to watch, and I really enjoyed the way that he kind of integrated in with the rest of the Autobots and the rest of the good robots and Transformers that we're following here. As far as the new Transformers brought to live action that we spend more time with here, the most enjoyable one actually for me that I've heard a lot of people say before going into this movie, and I do agree, is the character of Mirage, played by Pete Davidson. And when I heard he was going to be in this movie, I was like, alright, well, we'll see how it turns out. But I'm happy to say that I thoroughly enjoyed his performance here. I found it to be a fun and kind of whimsical character. There was a lot of humor around his character that I felt really worked. I thought that Pete Davidson's kind of dude bro personality worked really well with the character of Mirage. And of course you have characters like Optimus Prime in here, who's once again played by Peter Cullen. You got Bumblebee in the mix as well, and one of the other most notable ones is a character played by Ron Perlman, which is Optimus Primal, who you can see in all of the trailers and all that stuff is a big robot gorilla, and he was a great badass character in here. You got Michelle Yeoh in here as well as Air Razor, and there's tons of other characters. It was a really great cast across the board, and I felt for the most part, even with the Transformers who weren't given a whole lot of screen time and aren't given a whole lot to do in the film, they all had their moments of great action or humor that I thoroughly enjoyed. My biggest gripes with this movie overall is that it's just too simple of a tale. It's a really straightforward, simple tale that we've seen done over and over and over again in this franchise in and of itself. The human characters still are a bit lackluster, minus the character of Noah, but you know, for me, honestly, I would just love to see one full Transformers film that is all about the Transformers. One of my favorite sequences in all all of these Transformers films is that very opening sequence of Bumblebee, and I just wish that we would spend a whole movie on Cybertron just dealing with all of the ins and outs, the politics and the wars between the various factions on Cybertron. I feel like it would make for some of the coolest Transformers storytelling that we could ever get if they completely removed the human element. That's just my personal opinion. Some people probably will disagree with that, but I think at this point it's something that the fans want, and I know for me it's definitely something that I want, though I don't foresee that coming in the future based on the way that this film ends. But I am excited to see what happens based on the way that this film ends. The other main gripe I would have is that it just feels like there's a lot of Transformers that are introduced in this film or brought to screen for the first time that outside of some moments of action or humor aren't really given an abundance to do. So while this is a simplistic story, there are some areas I often felt they could have simplified even further and maybe expanded upon the actual narrative around a smaller group of Transformers and humans in this movie. With all that said though, this is a movie about robots beating each other up, exploding things, and trying to save the world, and on that front I think it really succeeds. It was fun, it knew what it was a silly, fun, big, over-the-top action blockbuster film about robots trying to get a device that's either going to save the world or destroy the world. It is what it is. It was fun to watch, visually enticing. I really enjoyed the CGI done here. I think that the visual artists definitely have a lot of praise that they should be getting. I think a lot of times with these Transformers films, they've become so muddled with the narrative issue around them a lot of times, and maybe some of the really stupid humor that some of these films have been filled with. And because of that, a lot of times, and because we're in this age where we have so many CGI heavy films, a lot of the digital artists tend to get kind of thrown to the wayside, and a movie like this can be just called bad, even though there's so much hard work that clearly goes into the visuals of this film. So as somebody who's just always loved the visuals of action and of movies and recognizes that everything that goes into really great shot action sequences that are both practical and digital, I think that there's way too much about this film that you can look at on an action level, just on that alone, how they shot certain sequences, the CGI, and all that stuff that I thought really was a highlight of this movie, and it's definitely something I want to praise. I don't think this is at the top of the Transformers list for me, but it's definitely nowhere near the bottom. I enjoyed myself thoroughly, and I am incredibly excited to see what they do with the next installment based on the way that this film ends. So a big thanks to you guys for watching. Definitely want to hear what you guys have to say. Did you like this movie? Did you not like this movie? Where does this rank for you when it comes to the other Transformers films? And are you also excited about the way that this film ended? I definitely can't wait to hear what people have to say down below in the comment section. And until next time, you guys stay frosty. I don't know. Bye-bye.